We start the panel discussion right now. We have the panelist with us, Dr. Anil Shinde, and his intro will come now, but in my own way, I'll introduce. He is a giant in the field of clinical trials, and he has very wide experience, both in our country and also abroad, and has been in the regulatory affairs, in the clinical trial affairs, introducing new drugs, new molecules in diabetes year after year. He is the senior vice president as the medical director at the Novo Nordisk, and his contribution has made a dent in the field of clinical trials. Next, we have with us Dr. Anupam Prakash, my dear friend from Delhi, professor of medicine at the Lady Hardy's Medical College, and he is an adept in the clinical trials. They will introduce in the course of their talk, so I will not take time. Next person in the panel discussion is Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy. Suffice just to mention, he has the maximum number of clinical trials, and he does it extremely well. And it is said that he has been one of the instrumentals who had produced maximum number of new drug trials in this country. Welcome, Srinivas.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Amongst us is our Sambit Das. Sambit is, all of us know, but I must tell you that he's kept the flag of endocrinology flying high along with Ave and others in our country. He is the Secretary of India, and he's also a great adept in the clinical trials. And dear friends, we have two moderators for the session, Professor Alok Kanungo and myself, and we have we will start the panel discussion. Alok, shall you start?
Yes. So welcome, dear panelists, to this interesting session of...
I have just only one thing to say to all the panelists, that we have about 22 questions, and we have about, I'll be in time, we have now 10:55. We have 35 minutes, 5 minutes for the the audience reaction. So we have 30 minutes. So we have roughly about a minute and a half, but depending on the question, it can be longer. Please start.
So welcome all the panelists, Dr. Shinde, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Sambit, and Dr. Anupam Prakash, Dr. Sarita, and everybody, Jayant and others. So I'll start with Dr. Shinde. Can you hear me, Dr. Shinde? Hello? Dr. Shinde, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes. I can hear you.
So you have the largest experience of conducting clinical trials of different molecules of insulin and others, where the molecules have come to market and they have changed lives. So what are the challenges facing clinical trials in India in diabetes? How do you overcome them?
Okay. So thanks for the question, sir. I think it's yes, there are several set of challenges were there, and as well as in terms of like how do we overcome, and that's what is our role being a employee of Novo Nordisk. So the number one challenge in terms of like having some time back approvals in place from the regulatory authorities approval. And the second challenge could be the ethics committee registration process. And of late, it has been quite a streamlined process in terms of DCGI approval, as well as all the ethics committees functioning quite well in terms of like
Right.
I have one question, Dr. Shinde. What is your learning experience working with different class of new anti-diabetic agents?
There is a regularization of registration.
I think, sir, your audio having some problems, sir. Dr. Anil?
Yeah, now it's better, sir.
Yeah,
Can you
better,
hear me?
Yeah, much better now. Much better now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that you have worked with many anti-diabetic agents while being in Novo Nordisk, even now. And you have also instrumental in bringing them unexpectedly earlier, like you have brought semaglutide to our country. I congratulate you for that. What has been your experience in working with various classes of anti-diabetic drugs for their approval, for their
So,
clinical trials?
yeah, I think every class is unique in terms of improving care of our patients, and some are easy to introduce to the patients. Some are a little bit complicated, and if it is like injectable and oral, and I would talk about the safety profile of the product, which can also makes a better acceptability and adaptability of the patients. But I think, sir, Novo Nordisk is a purely R&D based organization. We keep everything very transparent.
Recruitment and retention activities in clinical trials as a principal in
Country, we work very closely.
after this.
Hello, hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's clear. Please continue.
Yeah.
There will
Yeah,
be
I think there's some network issues. So with a collaboration, like extensive collaboration.
I think there is a network issue, sir. Dr. Shinde.
Yeah, we'll come back to Sreenivasa Murthy now. Alok's question, Sreenivasa would like to answer now.
Sir. Yes, sir. I think the routine challenges is the media has got a negative propaganda to the trials. That is what we see. Whenever we try to consent, try to brief a patient about an upcoming study or a potential study based on the inclusion criteria of a given patient, the first thing they say, sir, you want me to become a guinea pig. This is the calmness sentence which is seen out of 10, about 5 patients easily tell us, no, doctor, we don't want your trial. We don't want to be a guinea pig. Thanks to COVID, I think it has brought things into limelight about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. So many of the common people are aware about the stages of or phases of clinical trials. And that has made life definitely easier for us, because I've been doing this from about 18, 20 years. And the most difficult task is to consent a patient, because the calmness misbelief they have is an experiment or a guinea pig issues. And they do not understand that phase 3 is much safer compared to phase 2 or a phase 1. And that's the difficulty. For example, SEMA, I'm currently doing 2 trials, which is both a tablet form and the injectable form, a CBOT, and a nephro compromised patients, the EGFR compromised patients, called FLOW and SOUL studies, which are about 3 years duration, long term. And retention is the another part, the second part of the question, is a big task. So we need to identify the right patients when you choose the patient. For example, this is about 3 to 5 years duration of a study, and we need to retain the subject for 3 to 5 years in a study with a new drug versus placebo arm. There is a placebo arm in this study called Solar Flow, and that is a big task. So we need to choose the right patient in the beginning when we know the patient, their history, their background, their family members, because many times after 1 or 2 years in these long-term studies, the patient will be last to follow. So that's a big challenge for us to retain them. So it is very important for the principal investigator to get involved during those visits, because in a smaller duration, like in a 6 months trial, which is a standard 24 weeks trial, which we do a lot of trials, there the retention is not a big problem. But the retention question comes up when it is a 3 to 5 years old study, like the SOUL study, which we are doing now on SEMA CBOT, which is a big task. So the PI has to, the principal investigator has to definitely get involved than giving it to the sub-investigators or to the coordinators. And this is the commonest mistake which my colleagues do as to conduct in the clinical trials, that they give responsibility to the sub-investigators and they may not handle the patients properly, because most of the patients expect you as an experienced doctor or their family doctor to treat them every visit, which is the key, that we need to dedicate a fixed hours in our routine practice to the clinical trial. That is why most of the busy practitioners, though they may be seeing more number of patients, are not successful investigators, because you need a dedicated team, and more than that, dedicated PI, the principal investigator, is the key to retain the patients and also to recruit. And for example, I recruit most of the trials. I do a globalized recruiter, and that's why I faced the US FDA audit in my center, world's first Canadian Health Authority audit, DCJ audit in February. I've got another global audit this 2021. So the recruitment in retention is a good data to provide to our society.
Thank you, Srinivas. Wonderfully answered, giving the secret. I'll come back to you with one question, then I'll pass on to Anupam, Sambit, and others. Just wanted to know very briefly, maybe 2 sentences, how to set up a hospital or center for the clinical trials which is compliant with the requirements of DCGI or the global ICS GCP.
Right,
Just give guidance to our listeners.
Yeah, got it, sir. I think the ICS GCP and Schedule Y, that is what we follow in our country. And for that, you need a dedicated, we'll start with the record section. You need to have a history of the patient. Record section is the key. Then the consenting storage of documents. So you need a dedicated storage compartments, dedicated room with a restricted access. Then you need a dedicated drug room with a temperature control. 24 hours, it should be having a backup of a generator, which should have an auto switch. They will, in fact, during an audit, just to give an example, sir, they check the generator time switchover. When you switch off the main power, they switch off the main power and check how many seconds the generator will switch on, so that there is no temperature deviation to your investigational products which you are stored in the refrigerator. So there has to be a dedicated drug room, IP room with a restricted access. There has to be a storage compartments with a metal cupboards, dedicated space, and an archival room with a NABL accredited or equivalent laboratory. And of course, a dedicated staff members as per ICH GCP. There has to be a sub-investigator. The qualifications of these, the training certificates, the calibration certificate, even your BP apparatus, the weighing scale, the height, the podiometer, everything has to be calibrated every 6 months. And more than anything, there has to be a site SOP, standard operating procedures, which has to be updated every year, at least once a year. You need to update it based on your experience, the site SOP. And above all, you should have a dedicated ethical committee, preferably NABH accredited ethical committee. So this is comprises of a whole setup for a given site. And this is very important for us to have, because when you face an audit, if any of these things get deviated, then it's a major finding. For example, the temperature deviations, which are very important, crucial, and it has to be a restricted access. And the where you consent, the area where you conduct an informed consent. Because as you know, the DCGA, based on the 2015, 31st July, we had an order of AV consenting. Audiovisual consenting is a must for a new chemical entity, which is very important. So how do you record audiovisual consenting? That has to be there in your SOP, and you need to follow your SOP. You need to store a pen drive or a hard disk after consenting for 15 years. So the archival room, archival capacity with a fireproof alarm, and that alarm, again, you need to update it every year. The alarm part, the maintenance part, the AMC part, the refrigerator AMCs, the calibration certificate. Of course, it sounds very big task responsibilities for the investigator. But once you set up, it will go on an auto mode. But the main problem with our busy practitioners I see is they do not have time dedicated to the clinical trials. That's the biggest problem I see with my colleagues, is they don't want to dedicate, they don't want to deviate from their practice. And I'll tell you, it is definitely very good that you get a first-hand information and you have that feeling of well-being, what we say to the patients, that when a new molecule comes out and you have faced an audit and successfully you have passed out, you have that self of giving to the society, giving back to the society.
Thank you. I will now come back to Anupam. I'll request Alok to take over for questions to Anupam. I'll just start the first question. Anupam, you have been one of the pioneers in this and kept the flag flying high in Delhi. Anupam, what has been your experience regarding the benefit to the patients when they get recruited to the clinical trial? Then Alok will take over. Anupam.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kanungo and Dr. Jayant Panda, and obviously Professor Das. And Professor Das has already at the outset said that I have only 1 minute to answer, including the question also, including the question also, 1 to 1.5 minutes. But yes, continuing with what Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy said, there are two things for clinical trials which are very important. One is motivation and dedication. That obviously all of the panelists here have, and obviously including Dr. Das, who has been a very senior teacher and himself has been a pioneer. So with that, I would come to the benefits. Yes, there are a number of benefits that our participants can have. Definitely in a government setup like ours where we are working, it carries a lot of meaning to the patients, because those patients who get enrolled in clinical trials, they derive a lot of benefit, because otherwise they don't have that facilities. Because under clinical trials, they not only get the facilities apart from whatever glucometers, etc., pre-testing also, and standard of care testing which is there. And otherwise also they get the facilities of a close follow-up, because in the government hospitals, we don't have those all educators, etc., which a private setup can provide. Apart from that, the safety issues also, and the patients get the latest medications, like Dr. Das was saying about the semaglutide, which is available. So those benefits can be given to the poorer sections and the middle class also, which is coming to the government hospitals so in such a large number. So that is the actual benefit that patients have. They get access to all strata, because we balance out what Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy gets. So we have the lower strata which is there. So that is what we have a very good balance that way. So we are the harbingers for the lower strata and the middle strata which is there. Definitely he also has the EWS category people and beds are allocated. We also have some very good follow-up also, like the CGHS beneficiaries, some MP, etc., MPs also. But by and large, I think we in government setup balance whatever benefits are there. Patients definitely get the latest in know-how, drugs like semaglutide and other drugs also, the oral preparations also that Dr. Murthy just talked about. So I think that is the best benefit for all the patients that we have.
Great. I think,
Professor Das, sir, I've got a comment, sir.
Yes.
I've got a comment on Dr. Anup words of saying benefits to the patient. You cannot coerce a patient, you cannot influence a patient by saying you will get a latest drug, so you be part of this study. As per GCP, ethically, we are not supposed to. And remember, the semaglutide has also got a placebo arm. So we need to equally explain that you have only 50-50 chances of getting this drug. And most important point during consenting, we need to emphasize that this is not the only treatment possible for you. There are other routine clinical treatment practices what we have. You have got another option also. This is not the only option. So we cannot coerce or influence a patient saying you get the latest drug which is there in the US, so you get it free. No, you cannot use such terminologies in GCP. Very, very clear. That will be a GCP violation, which is a major finding in our audits if we do that. So we cannot use those terminologies.
I think Dr. Sreenivas, my question was, at the end of the show, at the end of the thing, how it has benefited the patients. I think Anil also will agree with me that, the drugs, I mean, there are patients who come back, several trials, people come back and ask for the go, like sildenafil. There are some benefits which the patients get. But as you rightly said, it cannot be unfolded, blinded, it cannot be made visible at the beginning
Exactly,
of the
sir.
trial.
So that was my.
But
Yeah,
sir,
correct. I think you are correct.
that benefit remain, that is only for placebo. Dr. Murthy, we have other drugs also, because we had the bias, we have stepwise, all those things where the comparator arm like Glargine available in the government setup over the counter, even in the best of setups. So a comparator arm which gets Glargine, or even for that matter a premix which is there, at times we don't have the regular supply in the government setup of all these things.
No,
So
no,
that
right,
way
Anupam.
patients definitely benefit.
Yeah. My point was we cannot use a terminology
Yes,
saying you
that
are
is agree. That
benefited
agreed.
That is
because
okay.
of this
That's
arm.
No,
okay.
We cannot use
it is
that. That was my point.
not for the patients. I said at the end of the trial. At the end of the trial, it has
Yes, sir.
benefited the patient. Yes, Alok, please take over. Alok.
Dr. Sambit,
Yes, sir.
welcome. You are in a corporate sector, Apollo groups. Getting patients in the general hospital or private hospital, moderate clinics is easy. But in a corporate hospital, how easy for you to recruit patients?
Sir, first of all, thank you, Alok sir, Ashok sir, for giving the opportunity. And as we have and goes away, but sometimes if you explain it properly that you are we are going for a study, you actually select the people who for your study, and then just give some 5 to 10 minutes time for counseling about the study, and you give them the ICF in beforehand, and then they come, they read, and whoever comes back we can recruit actually. So it's not exactly that difficult. But in corporate hospital I feel other challenges are there, because in Apollo group they have an ARI, and the whole team is recruited centrally actually. It's not that I recruit the team, and sometimes that team sometimes that is good, sometimes that's not that good. So sometimes we face challenges in some of the trials.
Good.
It all depends on the team that you lead.
Yes, sir.
That it depends on the team that you lead. But what is your experience? Suppose you counsel 30 patients. How many of them agree?
Sir, actually, if we first of all we have to select who are actually the real candidates. Like, we just keep an inclusion exclusion criteria list in the OPD, and I myself think who is the real candidate, who can be a prospective candidate. Then if then we start telling initially about the trial, and then we give them the ICF document. And if you are telling there are 30 patients and I have given them the ICF, then probably 4 or 5 come back agreeing to that.
Right.
I think
there is an inclusion criteria and there is an exclusion criteria. You first select patients basing on that.
Yes.
After that, you start counseling.
Correct, sir.
Ashok bhai.
Yeah, I just come back to very few questions. We have now 11, 12. So we have 11, 10 actually. We have got another 10 minutes to discuss few issues. It will be rapid fire round. Now first to Professor, to Dr. Anil, my dear friend. Anil, what are the best practices for documentation, for data capturing, and data retention? Anil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. Now it is clear.
Okay. Yeah, it's a question related to documentation. So it is basically a mindset. How do we record the history of patients in medical notes of the patient, hospital records? And I think it is a clinical research fundamentals of documentation. Whatever we do, whatever we discuss with patient, whatever the test we offer to the patient, whatever the findings we record, and that has to be recorded in a source document of the patient notes, and that becomes practice over a period of time. And I think for most of the situations, the clinicians are extremely busy, and doctors see more than 100 patients in a day, so it is not possible for them to record everything. But I think the clinical research opportunity gives the opportunity to record in a right manner. And I think most of the professors on the panelists now, and I think the young investigators also find at an early stage of when we start the clinical trial activities, difficult to document everything. But I think with the constant discussion and constant negotiation, I would say that, and bringing importance because of the audits, because of the inspections, and that is possible when they learn from those experiences. And we also believe that that's a way we can improve the patient care by proper documentation.
Sreenivas, very brilliant answer, Anil. Sreenivas, how do you handle storing medicines? Do you have any challenges in storing the trial medications, and what do you do for that?
Sir, I don't face any challenges because we have got a dedicated room with a refrigerator with a -70, -20 refrigerator, and there are 4 refrigerator of 2 to 8 degrees, which have got a L-Pro, Libero, what we call, and these alarm, they beep whenever there is a temperature deviation. But for semaglutide, for example, tablet, where we store, that has to be properly ventilated. There has to be a cupboard which is designed exclusively for that, which is, of course, I have designed on myself by experience. And you need to have a air conditioning where it has to maintain below the ambient given for that geographical area. For example, in Bangalore, we maintain around 24 to 22 degrees every day. Day and night, the air conditioner has to run, and there has to be a backup generator. And the generator should take over immediately when the main power goes off. So that's very, very important, because if a drug, the L-Pro Libero, what we call the temperature sensing instrument, we call it as hygrometers also, those, if they deviate temperature, the entire batch of medications which are stored in that refrigerator has to be quarantined, and the medical monitor will take a call about reusing it or discarding the entire, and we have to have a new batch. So that's a difficulty we face whenever there is a temperature deviation. There will be about 2 to 3 days where we cannot dispense that IP, the investigational products which are stored in that refrigerator, until a new batch arrives. And very important, because even by mistake, people should not switch off the AC. Some of the times it happens.
Thank you for giving very practical tips. It comes with experience. Anupam, how do you handle 1 or 2 difficult quote-unquote patients? And can we switch over to e-consent? Is it possible?
Sambit? I think that's a very important question. And when the video consenting came some years back, so that was the first hurdle actually before a patient can be included. But I usually think it actually started with the DEVOTE trial. So when we were doing, so actually the initial, if the person gives a consent for video ICF, then actually if we are completing that, then the retention is actually good. And in DEVOTE trial, we had a good retention from our center. So I think that's not a very difficult task, but if we actually convince the patient properly and tell him properly, then they actually go for it. But given the COVID pandemic and the later on in future, and I think an e-consenting is a better option.
Yeah, I think,
no, Sambit, that cannot happen. That cannot happen, yeah, because a written informed consent process is a must. Added to that is a AV. It's not vice versa. You have only AV consent and no written. It has to be a written consent. A copy of a signed ICF has to be given to the patient.
Yeah,
so it cannot happen.
Sreenivas, my point was probing. I do understand that written consent is a must, but we are changing with times. Nobody thought that Corona will change everything for different. I mean, I'm not telling better or worse. So I mean, let us see what happens in future.
Yeah, I can add, sir. I can add. I think as you rightly said, the world is changing with the COVID pandemic, and there could be possibility. But I completely agree with Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy that presently it is a paper and pen signature along with video consenting it's a practice, and it is a guidance, and we will follow. But if there is some pandemic continues and then research gets impacted, and then could be digital signatures should be approved, and that could be possibility. Nowadays we are also signing a lot of confidential documents on a digital platform, and which is valid by accepted by FDA and EMA authorities also.
So, but end of the day, patient has to visit for a sampling. Baseline investigations has to.
They will modify. Absolutely.
Sambit.
Dear friends, we have few questions in the chat box. I'll take up quickly, then I'll hand over to Professor Alok. First question is again to Anil. Anil, do you have the facility of the patient portal? And for the people who are in the audience, those who want to know what patient portal is, a portal in which Anil puts all the information. Do you advocate patient portals? Do you have patient portal facility, Anil? Just very brief answer.
Yeah, sir, we have a requirement from the Government of India, the clinical trial registry. Before we start any study, it is mandated by the authority to register our study in that portal. So we have to declare what is this study, what is this molecule, who are those investigators, and this is a mandatory requirement from the health authority. So everybody, like physician as well as a patient, will have access for this information. And we do get some contacts for some rare disorders, growth hormone developmental molecules or hemophilia molecules, but we don't get much diabetes related studies requirements, and we refer it to the respective locations. Like if it is from Bangalore, I would refer it to Dr. Murthy. If it is from Bhubaneswar or Cuttack, Dr. Sambit or Jayant Panda, so or Dr. Alok Kanungo, who is available. But it is practice, but it is not very well established in the process for the patient body.
Yeah, there's one question is regarding to Anupam. I'm putting it to you, but question from the audience. How do you manage different trials of diabetes with comorbidities? Diabetes, hypertension, diabetes with etc. etc. How do you manage that? How do you manage that diabetes comorbidities? How do you manage those trials?
Diabetes comorbidities trials, sir, there are a number of them, and we do manage them. The problem here is not patient. We have a number of patients, so recruitment is not a problem. But management, yes. So it all actually the standard of care remains the same overall. So that is not a problem. But the specific management or the intervention that is there, that we always have according to the protocol. So these things are actually enshrined in it. But yes, those which are not enshrined, like some things like their patient may have a CAD and it is not a cardiovascular outcome trial, then obviously then those things go into an SAE and we have to manage accordingly. So that was one of the setup question when you addressed Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy. So yes, the DCDI now mandates that when you do a clinical trial, then you should have an emergency setup and a backup there. So I think again, sir, with all those things that you said, that patient confidence, and if you keep a close follow-up, the comorbidities can be easily managed also.
Sambit,
Yes.
you have been part of many trials. Can you tell the audience what are the trials and what was your experience in brief?
And what was the most exciting trial?
Exciting trial.
Right, sir. Sir, I've been I've done trials on lixisenatide, the injectable semaglutide, degludec, and one glargine, and the insulin co-formulation. So, and there are on SGLT2 inhibitors also, and another on T3 T4 combination in hypothyroid patients. So there are few of these are the few trials which I'm in. So the most exciting was probably my first trial when we first built up a setup in our hospital for a clinical trial, and that was the Get Gold trial. And we had an external audit for that also, and we successfully passed that. So otherwise, we enjoyed all the trials.
Dr. Shinde, now there are few number of trials from Northeast. Very few. Why it is?
Yeah.
Why it is so?
You mean investigators, sir, or you mean
investigators?
Investigators, yeah. So it is a historically, sir. I can share, like last 20 years, we have been working with working on diabetes as well as endocrine disorders as well as obesity. So generally, the participation as well as the recruitment as well as the interest from the larger community, the creating the interest is a little bit slower than the rest of the India, as I would say, and that's the reason. And we kindly we take quite good amount of efforts to bring many investigators in terms of like giving adequate training, giving them support to build the infrastructure for the hospitals, as well as to bring, but still there is a very slow progress as compared to the rest of the India. And that is the one reason, and I request all of you, those who are listening, and I think there is a lot of merit in participation in a global clinical trial, as well as your own research, clinical research you can do. In a routine practice also, you can generate a lot of publications on your record, because you have thousands of patients following with you, and where we can do our own research, how patients perform, how patients contributed, and how patients work in with different type of insulin, different type of OADs, and those publications can be also prepared by yourself, being a part of your own research activity. And we will encourage those kind of initiatives from your side as well.
Anil, great, Srinivas, great Sambit. Anupam, I have last question to you. What was also my problem? Why can't these clinical trials we will conduct, as Srinivas said, the PI is the PI is the PI is the PI. But why it can't be part of a postgraduate thesis? I mean, the why MCI or today NMC says it cannot be a thesis. If it made a thesis, it helps. Anupam.
Sir,
Difficult question, but it's a question by one of the audience person.
Sir, I agree with the concept of thesis being given as clinical trials, but the problem is the commitment of students for a clinical trial cannot be established, nor can be the experience. Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy
as a part of it. You know, Anupam, I asked some MD exams, what is phase 3 trial? What is phase 2 trial? People say phase 2 trial is animal trial. You know, they have no idea regarding the trial. So but now people are better. So that's what I'm telling you, it can be done. Dear friends, it's exactly 11:30 now. Now I think the last word, the message to the audience, starting with Sambit. Happy second, 30 seconds. Your message to the audience, Sambit. We have got 1 minute left.
Yes, sir. I think the Eastern Zone is doing less clinical trials.
Yes,
I think we should all come out with that, and we should educate the other physicians how to do that. So I think this sort of session is going to help all of you.
Fantastic. It's a good session. Fantastic. Pull up the socks. Srinivas, a single sentence message.
Yes, sir. Clinical trial is a passion for me, but I think all of us should take pride in participating. See, because of clinical trials today, exactly. I have been interviewed by none other than Professor A.K. Das. That I can't imagine otherwise that sir will interview me. So that is my achievement, I feel, today, that I've been interviewed by Professor A.K. Das. And that's an achievement which all of us should take pride in conducting clinical trials and giving back to our society.
Thank you. Anupam.
I reiterate, people have to be motivated and dedicated. As Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy says, it has to be a passion. And the most important thing in clinical trials is whoever is doing it has to document. Documentation is the key word every now and then. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Anil, last word.
Yeah, so clinical trial in India, it's taken a giant leap, and it helps patient, it helps professionals, it helps hospitals, it helps entire society, and it also strengthens overall health of the country. And I'm firm believer it has definitely improved the lives of the thousands of patients across country, those who are part of drug development studies, at least in the Nordic studies, I can tell it. So thank you very much.
Correct. I quoted David Nathan, where the life has been extended by 5 to 7 years, and the quality of life has improved at least by 5 years. So great. And over to my dear friend Alok to give the final word and close it.
Thank you, Professor Das. Thank you all panelists, Sambit, Anupam, Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy and Dr. Anil. In last 20 years of my experience in clinical trials, I feel very happy and proud when I see those molecules we are using clinically after 2 years.
Great. I think that's a good secret. Correct. I think you said the correct thing.
Analogs.
I mean, when you see the drug you tried in the market, it's a great satisfaction for you.
Exactly.
You brought it to market. Fantastic.
Yes.
And as if we know the ins and outs of the molecules, their safety profiles, because we have been a part of that. It's a great satisfaction for PIs and everybody. This was a different session. We don't find a session on clinical trials in any of the conferences. We thought we must educate our friends and update them on this, and we are lucky to have all the best minds on clinical trials in NUCD 7th edition.